First, congratulations for this beautiful group that is here. It's such an opportunity to grow together. Who are we without one another? By the way, I want to thank everybody for your patience. I was just finishing an interview with Dr. Post, who is good friends at Cardek Radio. He was talking about a book on Alzheimer's, and so beautiful. I would certainly recommend to everyone to go to YouTube Cardek Radio or Facebook Cardek Radio to watch our interview with him, because there are moments in which he says, I'm much like Cardek. I could be a great spiritist. And he says how he loves reading Cardek. He learns with Cardek. And he's a renowned scientist in this world who knows the great leaders of science and politics and religions. And he was in 2014 here in DC at an event with Divaldo Franco. So it's interesting because as we just finished our conversation about Alzheimer, we are here talking about childhood. And then I closed the remarks with him saying, there is so much about our connection with children that can at some point really prevent us from escalating into so many things later in our lives. As a scientist myself, I've researched for almost 20 years in the fields of long-term effects of neonatal injuries. And this is exactly where it goes convergent with Spiritism right now, what we're doing to our children and how we are educating them can make a huge difference in many decades to come. Right now, 2022, we are certainly educating the children of the regenerative world. I keep repeating this to parents every day because this is Spiritist parenting per se is my preferred field of studying Spiritism. And certainly knowing that however we are educating our children now, the mindset needs to be of how they will be operating in the world as it will be in the state, the mode of regeneration. We know through Chico Xavier that in 2057, we will be officially there. So the question is, are we educating our children with the mindset of the new world? Or are we still falling behind and educating them like many parents do? They say, if your friend hits you, just hit them back. If your teacher is not good, oh, that teacher is terrible. So this is the old-fashioned way, old world. Now we're talking about the new world. Some of us may be getting there too. And what is going to happen in that new world? It's all about where the good shall prevail. We're getting there. We're in this transition. And Cardek, amazing as it is, as an educator, a visionary, someone who became this main connection to codify all the information from the illuminated minds of the spiritual world, bringing Spiritism to us in his last book, The Genesis. He lays out the characteristics of the new generation. Back then, what does that mean? I know many Spiritists. The biggest mistake that I see in our movement is that when we keep postponing the responsibility of the new generation as if we don't belong to the new generation. Cardek talked about the new generation that was coming up. And we are already centuries past, and we haven't realized that we belong to that. And we keep looking at our children and grandchildren saying, maybe they are the ones. No. you belong to that new generation. And you probably didn't notice. And maybe you do because you want to do things differently. And the world still blocks your way. And these are some characteristics that we want to talk about. In the United States, back in 2005, 2006, 17, 16 years ago, there was a big movement around the world, especially the New Age movement, the spiritualist movement, talking about Indigo Crystal Children. Many people were talking about it. Then there was an American friend who became good friends with Spiritism, Amy Bianc in Chicago. She knew of Divaldo Franco and our works in Baltimore. And she said, Vanessa, I would love some spiritist take on this spirit Indigo Crystal Children. Then I talked to Divaldo Franco back then, and Divaldo Franco said, I'm up to it. And we brought him to Chicago. And I remember right when we were at the airport, my friend Daniel from Baltimore and I flying to Chicago, meeting Divaldo Franco and Uncle Nilsson, both founders of the Mansion of the Way. When we were there, and Amy Bian called me and said, I can't pick you guys up, but I sent a driver in a limousine. I'm like, oh my gosh, why do we need a limousine? But good for Divaldo, because after a long trip, he could rest. And on our way there, he was already brainstorming on how he understands, as the Spiritist view, on what others called and labeled Indigo and Crystal Children. Some Spiritists later criticized us for addressing the issue, saying that we were stepping grounds that were not Spiritist. Maybe, as we said, Divaldo and I, they did not study Cardek much, because Cardek was just like this. He would see everything that was happening and he would bring it to the Spiritist plate to evaluate with Spiritist eyes. He would read books, he would read letters, he would have meetings with people, even newspaper articles that talked about things that were tangent, and he was publishing in the Spiritist magazine, addressing those issues from a Spiritist angle. So we were doing nothing different from what we learned with the codifier Allan Kardec, who was, by the way, an excellent educator. So we addressed it in a conference. And at the end, Divaldo Franco asked me, what did you think? I said, I think it's great, but I think words are words. If they're not written, they're just lost. What if we compile it all in a book and add more to really solidify it? It seems that as we did it, the commotion just went off. It was a big hit even in Brazil, because the book comes in Portuguese and in English. And at the time, Divaldo had this big conference in Sao Paulo that had more than 20,000 people just to launch the book there, besides the launching here in 2007. So later, I prepared a set of slides based on what we agreed to release in the book, and to explain to the spiritualists in Lilydale in 2007. And since then, whenever people ask, we keep growing into the understanding of what Cardec defined as the new generation, to the point that last year, 2020, we were able to release as a major project the Spiritist Parenting, not only the website, but the app. Nowadays, people can connect freely to the app Spiritist Parenting to have a broader sense of understanding and also tools to work as parents, being empowered in their mission. Now, as we go back to the topic, and Anna and friends, feel free to stop me at any time if you have a major question and you don't want to wait until the end. But I've separated a few slides, not everything we want to show, but just to go back to this understanding, okay? So again, Indigo and Crystal Children are terms that Spiritism created, but we are addressing it. And what is it? So basically, this is the cover of the book when it was first released. And when I start this, I like to show these paintings that back then nobody knew in Spiritism. Now some people know, but those were the first time we released them. Who introduced us to these paintings? Amy Bianc, but who painted them? Now you may know, Akiane. Back then, she was a girl, and now she's a beautiful woman who has grown into this phenomenal talent. She is considered a prodigy child. Back then, she was in full contact with Amy Bianc, and she introduced me to her. I was able to talk to Akiane's mother, and she formally released the copyright of 2 of her paintings about Jesus that we added in the book with Divaldo Franco. So Akiane, when she was born in a family of atheists, immigrants who came to the United States, but atheists, she was never raised believing in God or Jesus or anything. But at the age of 8, she started painting things related to Jesus and God, and her biggest wish that everyone would love God and one another. A different child. If you have children, they are a blessing, but rarely we're going to hear words just like that. There are many books that came about talking about the Indigo Children, Indigo Evolution. Children like Akiane came into this category that Cardek would say the new generation. But it wasn't only her in the present. Humankind's history has always presented prodigy children, so different, like Mozart. And for us as spiritists, Mozart is really something, right? As the editor-in-chief of the Spiritist magazine for 14 years, you can go to the website spiritistmagazine.org or .com, or to the app Spiritist Magazine, and get a hold of more than 56 issues that we have released over the 14 years. And there's one in particular that we dedicated to Mozart and to a phenomenal dialogue between Cardek and Mozart in the spiritual realm after he had his internship in the planet Jupiter. And he comes back talking about his experience there, even draws a house he had in there, telling us that the phenomenon of having children who are more advanced, and not only more advanced intellectually, but really advanced in other areas of intelligence, including spiritual intelligence, is a common factor, but it's becoming more and more evident as we transition from a planet of trials and expiations into regenerative world. For those who want to know more, of course, go to the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 3, and there we get to know more about it. But even Edgar Cayce was the great medium, American medium. People say psychic, we call him medium. Last week I had an interview with Joanne DiMaggio, who is deep into Edgar Cayce studies. And we know Edgar Cayce has a contribution with the children of a new generation. There was a book about it, Indigo Children, that was written on how he understood these children of the new generation. So If we go to Cardek's introduction of the Gospel according to Spiritism, he talks about the universal control of the Spiritist teachings. And this is exactly what it is. This information, the information about the new generation, the coming of Indigo Crystal Children, Rainbow Children, however we name them, comes from different countries, different minds, different times that converges to what Cardek said. They're coming, they are here, they've been here, and they are here in greater number for a particular purpose. But who are they? Guardian angels? Are we dreaming of superheroes? Indigo children, they say they have a blue aura. Let's go back to Cardek, chapter 18, item 28. He says in 1868, they have precocious intelligence, reasoning powers, joined to their inner and innate sentiment of goodness and of spiritualist beliefs, which is the unmistakable sign of a certain degree of anterior advancement. This definition is key for us because many people look at their children, they say, we're going to talk about ADHD here. Oh, I think they are indigo, they are children, because it's a way out, right? Why? Because they can't sit still. No, that doesn't make you any precocious in your intelligence. Oh, because they are bored. Okay, but are they good in their feelings? Because I'm sorry, if they are bored and they can't sit still, but they want to hit and they are aggressive, it doesn't fit in. Then they have a behavioral, psychological, spiritual issue to take care of. So Cardek was very thorough in describing what he called the unmistakable signs. So there are milestones to be achieved as children develop. Not in everything, but you can see they are ahead. Some they're clearly ahead. Their reasoning is sharp, but aligned to that, they don't want to hurt people. Instead, they want to be good. They want to see people united, caring. And some of them, like Akiani, she had this feeling of willing to see people gravitating to the love for God in a family where she never learned anything about it. Cardek says more. It will not be composed exclusively of eminently superior spirits, but of those who, having progressed already, are predisposed to embrace all the progressive ideas and apt to second this regenerative movement that talks about the good prevailing over evil. So when we talk about evil, you know, we as spiritists know that evil is just the absence of knowledge and experience. It's a temporary state. Gradually, we are ridding ourselves of this ignorance and inexperience and co-creating the good with God. As André Luiz says in the book Evolution in Two Worlds, chapter 1, we're co-creators. And we may be now co-creators at minor level, learning how to co-create health in our very physio-psychosomatic dimension, the spiritual body, the physical body, but at one point we'll be co-creators at major level like Jesus and many other pure spirits. Based on this definition, now we have grounds to go back and understand that over time, many people came along with those abilities. And it may be mediumistic, in which we needed to be the bridge through which a new movement came along, like the Fox sisters, for example. It's not by chance that they became renowned. Of course, society was not prepared. Even his family didn't know how to shield them from the pressures. And it was difficult for them. The very spiritualists and historians talk about it. But when we talk about Indigo and Crystal Children, we can see, and it could be any cover in this book, the Spirit's book could be by any publisher, but we know that the Spiritist books came along thanks to Cardek's works, in conjunction with a team of mediums who were themselves different, ahead. Caroline and Julie Baudin, Ruth Jaffe, Aline Carlotti, and Hermance Dufault. Besides other mediums, those were the main mediums through which Spiritism came along. So when you and I opened the Spirit's book, the answers did not come through Kardec's mind. The very core of the stone of Spiritism came through preteens, teens. The knowledge that guides our lives came through the minds of teens and preteens, believe it or not. But what is beautiful here is to see Kardec working in perfect harmony with preteens and teens. And why am I emphasizing this? Because I think there is a big mistake in our current world when we say that adolescence is a bother, is a problem, and we teach that to our children. I would highly advise never to say those words and say what I say to my child and in our center. It's a blessing to be a teen, because as a teen, you have all you need to bloom if you just make a good choice and you're supported by parents that are conscientious and by a society that is supportive. We have to work hard to change this mindset that I believe, it's my personal opinion and forgive me for sharing it, but I believe this mindset of the current times, believing that adolescence is a problem, is a creation of the forces of darkness, because they know that there are beautiful, wonderful minds coming along that will start showing this new generation mindset at an early age, in their preteen, teen years, and they are already creating obstacles for the very parents not to allow the children to bloom into what they need. But Amanda Gorman recently did the youngest American poet who was at the inauguration of President Biden, is a clear sign to us that the new generation is already here, already making a difference, and there are eyes of wisdom who are recognizing them and opening grounds for them. So for us, the question remains, am I facilitating their work or am I still doubting it? For example, Chico Xavier himself was a child of the new generation described by Cardek. When he started his immersion in Spiritism, he was only 17, just like Divaldo Franco. What if the adults in their lives did not facilitate their growth, did not believe in them? Would they have been able to do what they did? No. So our task and mission as parents and educators in and out of Spiritist centers is to see how much we're facilitating the bloom of the new generation, not only for the children of the current times, but even inside of us. Just to remind us, how do we understand it all? The spiritual body is the very spirit. So we as a spirit, we're enveloped by the spiritual body that is connected in another dimension to the physical body. And in this multi-dimensional being that we store our memories in the perispirit, making us understand that what we have acquired in many lives is there. And if in this life we are to give way to these memories to advance even more, we cannot create obstacles to it. When people talk about indigo children because of their indigo aura, right? We say, of course, we're talking about a different vibrational level. Let's put this to a side and go back to the topic that Cardek made very clear since when they have come. He says to us, around 1972, and this is in the book that Divaldo and I published, around 1972, and then in 1987, the solar system penetrated Alcyon's photon belt, and since then, a new revolution has been unfolding the spiritual structure of the earth when a wave of spirits of that dimension came to promote subtle changes in the physical form in order to facilitate the intellectual moral progress so we can achieve more evolved levels. When Divaldo released that information as he had his research and talking with Joanna De Angelis, I said, Cardek was right. They have been coming in fewer numbers since that the end of the 19th century, beginning of the 20th century, and Divaldo says that remarkably, from 1972 onwards, there is a phenomenon that allows a wave, meaning a bigger number of them. I was born in 1972, so I feel like, oh, finally somebody understands us, because yes, we have come for this change, and who hasn't? If we are all in this transition. So nobody can wash their hands and say they are not. And as our friend here, thank you so much, Luis Berti, saying about what we mentioned as our action towards teenagers, the first and foremost, dropping this understanding that they are bothered. No, they are here to do their share, and we need to facilitate the grounds. So a little more as we are looking into this collective moment for us on earth, that we're not alone. In the Spiritist books, the Genesis, the Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 3, talking about different worlds, and about this solidarity amongst worlds. Moser is a clear case that Cardek brought to us, this interdependence. So there is for the earth a plan to upgrade its spiritual level in these years that we're preparing for. And we're not going to go into better planets if we don't have a new generation. This march of progress that Cardek talks about is gradual, he says, and slow, and insensible. But there's a group that may expedite it, bringing a sudden and rapid change. As he says, humanity is becoming adult, with new needs, more elevated, larger aspirations. It understands the emptiness of the ideas with which it has been fed and the insufficiency of its institution for its well-being. This was written in 1868. And then I know you and I may be reading this and say, yes, but look at these school shootings that happen in the US. It's An epidemic. Yes. So Vanessa, where is it? Well, yes, we understand. As the mentors have said to us in our mediumistic meetings, this pandemic has been shielding, protecting a lot of good spirits that are reincarnated in the US by suspending schools on and off because of the virus, because of the weather. We are protecting children for being assassinated. Yes, because it happened at Moses' time, at Jesus' time, when the forces of darkness knew the coming of wonderful great minds. And it's no different nowadays. There are some less evolved minds that are mixed up with great minds that are going to push the progress, and they want to hinder it. So what does it have to do with us? You're in Portland. I am in Northern Virginia, near to DC. What does it matter to us? It matters that wherever our children are, it's our way to advocate for greater security, like, for example, metal screening in each and every school, which should happen. And we should partake into securing our schools into greater educational methods. So we have to be active. We can't be passive saying, oh, the school system is failing us. We need to roll our sleeves and do our share in the school of our children, in the school of our grandchildren. We can't just sit back and say, oh, the world is failing us. No, we're part of it. We need to advocate for what Cardek is saying here, because right now, people are really adulting, spiritually speaking. We want more. But there are people who are still dormant to it. And it is in our daring that we're going to change everything. As they say in the Spirit's book, if evil is daring, the failing part of the ones who are good is because they are shy, they're timid. We need to rid ourselves of that shyness and do our share. It doesn't mean we're going to change the world, but we're going to make a difference where we are in our communities, starting with our spiritist centers. So how will Earth be a better place? When, Cardek says, the regeneration of humanity does not absolutely require the completely renewal of the spirits, but a modification, a change in their moral disposition suffices. This change, this modification, takes place with all those who are predisposed to it, when they shall have freed themselves from the pernicious influence of the world. Those who return then are not always other spirits, but often the same ones, thinking and feeling otherwise. This is humility. For our children, oh yeah, they are more advanced, but keep it down. Grounded, humble, humility is the key. Jorge Godinho Neri, the great friend of all of us, current president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, he used to say to me, Vanessa, Chico Xavier's great recipe for success was humility. Were it not for his humility, he wouldn't have succeeded. And we see in the book, The Messengers by André Luiz, that talks about reincarnation, reincarnatory plan, that we often fail in our reincarnatory milestones to be achieved because we lack humility. So if I have a child, or even if I feel it myself, I need to humble myself and know that now I am here to share a little of what I've learned from previous lives, but I'm not a genius in the sense of like, I was born a genius. I worked to acquire that knowledge, that experience, and now it's my turn to repair the past by sharing what I know, by sharing through what I do, wherever I am. So keeping ourselves humble, knowing that we're not creating a genius, we're not created genius, we conquered those advanced states. And I'm saying the we just because it could be any of us, it could be our children, it could be our grandchildren, it could be the children to come, the children of the past. Now, going back to the book, identifying our relationship with the Indigo Crystal Children. Well, many parents, educators don't know what to do with the children who are different. And they are different. Some people confuse it with autism, with ADHD. And we would say this. Chico Xavier, if you look in the latest issue of the Spiritist magazine, we have published an article in the words of the very Sueli Schubert, who was a scholar in Spiritism in Brazil, as she explains, and she's not the only person that reports it, Chico Xavier's explanation on autism in general. The spirits who didn't want to reincarnate. And how do we take care of it? By talking to the spirit and encouraging the spirit to be here, to embrace this new proposal. But they're not Indigo Crystal Children. ADHD people who are diagnosed, I see even adults nowadays claiming, I was just diagnosed with ADHD. As a neuroscientist, I understand, yeah, maybe your neurotransmission is, changed, giving room to the expression of ADHD. But spiritually speaking, maybe it's not the case. It's just that you are not accepting the proposal of this reincarnation either. You wanted to be in a different place, a different time with different people. So the radical acceptance of this reincarnation is key to reincarnate. There are many people in my practice at the School of Emotion that I find they have a hard time accepting the conditions of this present reincarnation. We're talking about cases that may be tangent to what we talk about the new generation, but not quite, because the Indigo Crystal Children, they may be not adapting well to the school, to the family, but they, deep inside, like Akiani, for example, they changed the family structure for the better. They changed the family structure, but for improvements, not chaos. So in interacting with our children and observing who they truly are without our ego, without our pride, humbling ourselves to really identifying how we're going to interact with this new generation. And a psychological question here comes in place. Will you accept your child to be better than you? Because I see many parents who say, yeah, I love my children, but they do not allow their children to be better than them. And reincarnation explains. We're touching several subjects on purpose because I know you may be asking questions, making comments at the end. In the non-spiritist field, James Timon, Dorian Virtue, and others talked about Indigo Children, and they classified, not us spiritists, it's not in the spiritist literature. We are just examining their classification as they studied the Indigo Children and observed that they can be classified in 4 different quadrants, like the humanists, the artists, the conceptual ones, and then interdimensional or transdimensional ones. The mediums, right? What does it matter to us? The understanding that one size does not fit all. Because Akiani was more an artistic type of child. but not everybody who comes in this new generation will be at that side. As Divaldo Franco revealed to us, Victor Hugo and other great minds in the arts are reincarnated to push the new movements, like a new renaissance in the arts for the world of regeneration. Yes, former poets reincarnated, and they show it from an early age, like Amanda Gorman. But now our world is opening the grounds for them more easily. We see many scientific minds who are getting into the sciences, the Mensa groups, the members of the Mensa group, showing these more advanced minds pushing in the field of science. But we have also in the field of spirituality. So for us as spiritists, as I just asked, do you accept your child to be more advanced than you? Cardek asked this question, is that possible? Question 197 of the Spirit's book. And they say, yes, that's very frequently the case. Do you not often see examples of their superiority in this world? But the point is, many of us do not allow it because of our, as it says in the book, The Gospel According to Spiritism, chapter 14, item 9, when St. Augustine has a whole thesis about the reincarnation of two minds who did not get along, and now they are in the same family, and how this shows up in their relationship later in forms of ingratitude, etc. So we as parents and educators need to ask ourselves if we are giving room for our children to be better than us, because that's the order of events. They are supposed to advance in areas that we did not. So when we see the studies of Spiritism and the bridges with the studies of children who remember previous lives in Dr. Stevenson's books, articles, scientific articles, the continuation with Dr. Jim Tucker, and then many others, for example, the books in the research and the practice of Dr. Carol Bowman, who was at Cardek Radio 2 weeks ago. She'll be back in March talking about children's memories of previous lives. We know that there are unexplained emotions towards the family that may come back in forms of unusual traits and behaviors. Their interests are different from ours. They have sometimes fears and phobias that nobody has, preferences that are different from everybody else, and even skills. So clearly, there's a lot for us to observe and identify and understand this child that we're responsible for to allow the full bloom of this child. In the case of Indigo children, they are highly aware children. They are more sensitive, they feel vibrations, they even feel like if you bring some of these children to places that are very noisy, they are very sensitive to noises. Even if they watch movies, they can see some movies that are commonly seen by other people. In them, it's like it's too much. And they are not autistic. Between autism and ADHD, a question for us. I would say, with all the respect to medicine and science, we still know very little. As a neuroscientist and a psychologist, I always recommend parents to be cautious in surrendering to the psychopharmacology, because it may be a band-aid, but not quite, because what you think is ADHD, I have seen many cases coming to our center. I would say the parents have not educated them well. Nowadays, people are against discipline. And we're not saying discipline spanking, because we're all against violence, any form of abuse. No, we don't hit, we don't spank. And as a spiritist, I understand that when a parent steps in the ground of physical aggression, I would say they lack deep love for this child. Because when you love and you're true friends with that spirit, you don't touch the physical body, and you don't even go into verbal abuse when we have a deep connection with that mind. So it shows to us that there is some reconciliation and love to grow in that relationship. But back to ADHD, I see many children nowadays who are not being educated well. I remember when my child was a baby, we would bring her to the center. She would stay with my husband on the back when I had to give talks, coordinate meetings. She was always quiet. And parents would say, "Can I bring my baby?" I said, "Yes." Who taught me this? Jorge Godinho Neri, the president of the Brazilian Spiritist Federation, when he was in our Baltimore group, he had his grandchildren there. He would bring them to every meeting, every Tuesday. And he taught us that we should welcome the children at every study meeting. So it's surprising when I see spiritists blocking the children, the teens off from the adult meeting, because how are they going to learn what we do if they are not the apprentices of it? When we put them in a different world, they will have a hard time transitioning into that adult world because it's very foreign to them. So we need to practice from the get-go as a baby. They come to the meeting. Of course, for us parents, it's demanding, but it would be selfish on us to say, "This is my time," as I hear parents saying. "This is my time. It's my meeting." Okay, then when they grow older, you want them to be in the center they want, because you made the center your place, not theirs. So sometimes I doubt the diagnosis that we quickly give, and I see a form of estrangement between the spirits of the parent. Like Khalil Gibran once said in his poem, the case of this anecdote of this mother and daughter who were somnambulic in their sleep. So they both woke up in their somnambulic state and went to the garden and started being aggressive at each other. But then they heard a noise. I think it was, I don't know, one of the nature, I don't remember, the rooster. And they heard the noise, they woke up, they looked at each other, and Khalil Gibran describes, they looked at each other very kindly, saying, "Oh, mommy, what are you doing here? It's so cold. Oh, my dear daughter, you're so loving." So Khalil Gibran, in a very spiritist way, the Lebanese poet, writer, was already portraying to us this duality in our relationship between parents and children that we need to bring reconciliation. And sometimes by labeling our children, "Oh, they are autistic, ADHD," we're then just pushing them apart, giving them medicine, instead of really treating the soul, the spirit. Are they misbehaved or indigo? Well, Cardek gives us the answer, right? In studies by medicine, and especially neuroscience, we see that physically there is a way to identify ADHD disorder. There is, by volume abnormalities in the brain. So this is another call to science to really, I know these type of tests are so expensive, but psychiatry is the only field in medicine that does not use brain imaging to diagnose the patients. And there is a current movement by psychiatrists pushing that direction, so we may be more precise in the treatment. And we would agree to that. So before sending our children to prescription drugs to tame them as if they were animals, we should actually go to a broader spectrum of medical, psychological, and even spiritual care before we go into these shortcuts that may not be efficient. Again, ADHD possible causes, past life tendencies, mediumship, spiritual obsessions, and not exactly ADHD. ADHD or autism in indigo children, we need to evaluate the moral dispositions of the child, the behavioral tendencies of the child, knowing that it's not a simple diagnosis, it's not linear. So having a second opinion, a third opinion, and a more complementary approach to the child will be more effective than simply labeling it and saying, oh, my child is indigo. That's why this child is behaving this way. No, nobody understands my child. That's a no-go attitude for us. Between indigo and crystal, crystal is the label of children who are more calmer, centered, compassionate, kind, like Akiane, actually. Later, people understood that she's the portrait of a crystal child. And we would say for us spiritists, we can already see Chico Xavier, Divaldo Franco. In their childhood, the full description of this transdimensional child, this crystal child that brings this regeneration into the world. They are not troublemakers. They learn to adapt themselves into a world and bloom into the world, and thanks to wise adults, they were facilitated into this world. And the question again is, are we facilitating the pathway that these children have to walk in this world to fulfill their tasks? I'm going to wrap up here as we've been together for an hour. We could go on and on. Certainly, I have more slides, but we don't need to go there now. Is to focus on bringing spirituality for our children. Why? Because we're spirits living on earth, and that's our priority, to really educate our children as immortal spirits and not as physical bodies that are maturing on earth. The physical body may be immature, as a scientist friend of mine said once, but immaturity does not mean that they are not developed for their stage. So seeing the wisdom in that stage of childhood and giving the proper education to allow that spirit to bloom and be prepared for the challenges, that's a certain thing, and the tasks to be accomplished and fulfilled in this reincarnation. I'm going to stop here, Anna, because I think of your time and maybe questions and comments that the group may be willing to share.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Well, I think that we probably have so many questions. I do. Thinking about this new generation, thank you so much. When we look at, and I do have 2 boys, as you may know, and one is 15, the other one is 12. And then what I see is how much they question about some of the decisions of the environment. So, for example, with Black Lives Matter or equality or social justice, thinking that for many of us, we've been kind of living on the status quo for decades. And then suddenly they say, why? why nobody's doing anything about this, right? And I would say even on a sexuality aspect, that they are much more acceptive, I would say, of the differences of, the type A, B, and C or D. And every time that my son kind of tells the alphabet, there's always a new letter that he adds into that, right? And for them, it's just like, well, what's wrong with that? I mean, that's their option, and that's okay. And for us, I would say many times it's difficult to understand or to accept, and for this new generation, things kind of come much easier on that standpoint. Do you want to comment that as well?
Yeah. Yes, I agree with you that this new generation is prepared. You can see what is a big deal for us, like, oh my gosh, all this new terminology and these new things. I asked my daughter and she's like, I understand. Yeah, I know. Well, it's their choice, right? For them, it's like second nature. For us, it's like, oh my gosh, don't say it. Don't talk about it. Why we're going to get this confusion about the bathroom A, B, C, D for different people. But for them, it's so easy. How should what is probably the best approach? I think I like Louise Hay. I know she's discarnated, but there's an audio. She says something that probably spiritists are like shocked, but I love what she says. She says, in the past, in previous lives, I may have been a man and a woman. For us, it's okay. But then she completes heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual. And that was a time when this discussion was not in the plate. She dealt with people who had HIV. So for her, she was deep into that to help people out. And I think she was right. Our sexual orientation in the past were all over the place. And she says, she compliments. Sometimes I was approved of my sexuality. Some other lives I was not. And we bring those prejudices and the traumas and the experiences in this life. So it's our issue. It's not our children. So I would say to parents, if this is an issue for us, if it really touches a chord and a nerve in you, go do some therapy. Go do some healing work, because it's your issue. It's not in their issue. That doesn't mean that we're going to tell our children, do whatever you like. No, because for us, the ethical moral line is very, very clear. But we're not going to judge, because as Jesus said about the woman who was to be stoned, can we cast a stone? Can anyone who has no mistake, and who can say anything if we could just review our previous lives? So for us, it's clear the approach in that regard, right, Anna?
Yeah, wow, I think that there's so much into that. And I want to open to the people who are here, if anyone wants to ask questions. I know this was like a lot of interest from our group. You can either write down the question on the chat, or you can just say. So Thais, do you want to pose your question, or would you like me to say that? Tabata as well?
Yeah, please, you can do, Anna. My English is not so good.
So Thais' question is, if we suspect that a child is either the indigo or crystal, what does it mean for us as parents, adults nearby? What should we do besides allow them to bloom?
By the way, Thais, your English is beautiful, and Anna agrees with me. It's beautiful, written and spoken. But I would like to say what to do, right? When a child is born, connected to us, even the children that are at our centers, and we are connected to them through their parents, through the educational purposes of the center. What is our role? To facilitate their spiritual growth, moral and intellectual. So it's important that we be good observants of our children. But that's where we fall short, because our busy lives are like this, right? Oh my gosh, they go to school till 3 p.m. and there's after school program. By the time we are together, it's already what? 5 minimum, 7 p.m. And then if they've done homework, then it's dinner. And then what else do we have to do together? There's no time. So first I would say, we need to be willing to be with our children. And that's where I see many parents fall short. They say, oh, but I have to work. Okay, so it's your choice. Your work is more important than your child's education. Then whatever happens, you're going to pay the price, because it's going to happen. If you are not home when your preteens, your children, your teens are coming from school, then you won't do your share. So to do our share, we need to be present, number one. We need to give up on so much that is happening in our lives, materially speaking. Sometimes we have to downgrade, go to a smaller house, to pay less bills, to be more present and work less, to be in this work with our children. So you have to be present, to be willing to be mindful with your children. And that's where we need to create a pleasant present. I was just talking to Dr. Post about sometimes we don't want to be in the present because it's very aversive. So how do you stay present? Children are children, they are loud, teenagers are loud, and they have, but if you're not willing to be there with them, we won't be able to let them bloom. So I think be willing to be present, be observant, and have good eyes, by the way, because I see some parents who are almost like they're very children's enemies. And they may well be, as Andrea Luiz portrays in many books, because they look at their children. I saw a parent saying the other day, yeah, you say this child is, saying to the mother, you say this child is advanced, but if she were really advanced, you wouldn't have a hard time making her do the homework every day. You see, this father does not love this child, because that comment is about someone who ignores the child completely and who does not love the child. Because the mother who is in close contact told me, I can tell this child is doing well, but all this father does is like passes by 5 minutes and label the child or doubt the capacity of the child. So we need to be willing to be present, to be willing to observe the talents, and to be willing to foster this blooming of the talents ourselves. Who are the parents who are willing to do this nowadays?
And I think you kind of also crossing a very important line, which is the limit that we as parents also put on the kid, right? Because some of us are afraid of correcting our children. So afraid of saying no, because that child may react A or B or C.
And it's positive psychology that I would recommend, Anna. Dr. Martin Salomon at Penn State University has a wonderful track record of how to educate our children into this positive parenting way. So we need to learn a new way, different from the way we were raised. We were raised like, no, repression, or the opposite, permissiveness. A few of us, majority, repression. Don't say, don't cry, don't speak, don't participate. And now we're like, how do I do this? we have to learn a new way. So there is a whole group nowadays talks about positive parenting, in which we learn how to educate without repression and without being permissive, which is also not loving if you allow your child to do the wrong and because you're afraid of saying no, right?
And maybe this is a topic for our next conversation, the positive parenting.
Yes.
Tabata has a question. Do you want to ask, Tabata? Or would you like me to ask?
Oh, sorry, I was on mute. I can ask. So the first one's about more autism and how to like determine a better path to examine and evaluate that kid, and especially when they are so young. And I say that because here in United States, at least, I don't know how it is in Brazil, they have like these formats that you need to fill every 6 months saying, oh, your kids do that or doesn't do that. And if not fit in that category, they just put the kid like, oh, this kid has a problem. So that is the way I want to see, like, how's the path to really evaluate the kids. My son is 2 years old. He was diagnosed with speech delay when he was 1 and 6 months. And now they're evaluating again for autism. So that's why I want your opinion on how to get maybe another doctor, or who should I see to evaluate better?
Yes. Thank God, Tabitha, by the way, lovely child. What's her name? What's the name? Bia?
What's her name? Bia.
Adorable. How old are you, Bia? Do you mind sharing? How old are you? I'm sorry.
Six.
You're 6. So you're in first grade? Great. Enjoy your school. School is the best. All right. So Tabitha, I hear you, and I would say we love our pediatricians, but as a faculty at the School of Medicine, the School of Dentistry, Health Sciences, I recognize that we don't know so much we need to know. We don't know as much we need to know. So I would say I would never stick to one opinion, to one diagnosis. I would look for others, and since you have the advantage of being 2 different cultures, the Brazilian and I say this because in Brazil, our medicine is already deeply filled with a more complementary approach. So we have homeopathic doctors, we have spiritist doctors, and I would certainly have another opinion from other experts, and deeper into the spiritual as well. But for our conversation here, I would say, like Professor Dípides Barçanufo used to say, observe your child as a spirit. Feel your child. Nobody can tell you better than you who your child is, irrespective of any label. I remember in our center, I saw a kid being born, and there was a complication at birth. We visited the child, I think it was, 11 years ago? Yeah, 11 years ago, 12 this year. And this child is now a beautiful student that was diagnosed with a very light form of autism. But that's what science can say. And I tell the mom, get rid of this label, because your child is beautiful and it's beyond the label. Science doesn't understand the full spectrum of the spirit that is reincarnated. But she did the whole 9 yards of the therapies that are needed. And he continues to bloom as a wonderful student. being treated in the linguistics, being treated in so many ways. And for all the kids that come to the center with autism, I see that they are so different and yet seem alike, but they're so different. So I would say science is still learning so much. Meanwhile, we have so many tools that we can use through homeopathy, through other complementary medicine ways, and especially the spiritual medicine, through the passes, through the spiritual education for our very children, reminding them that they are beautiful. Music is so important. Singing to them, singing with them, singing to them, to really come across as in our loving message and loving them, right? It's probably another topic to be studied in greater depth. Thank you, Tabitha. Thank you.
Vanessa,
Vina.
can I make a comment to that real quick? I think I don't have children, but I think in complement to what Tabitha asked and what you said, one thing that I observe is that there's also some work that we need to do as parents around this comparison, I would say, that we have in society, that it feels like that if your kid is not fitting like some kind of stage or even like acceptable society things that we think children need to do, right? Be communicative and talk to everybody, or do this or do this. Otherwise, you're not hitting that development or whatever, or acceptance in society. Then it puts a little bit of pressure on the parents to feel like, oh, my child is in delayed or it's not following. I think there's a lot of also lines on education, child education, that in conjunction of what you said of looking at your child is respect their timing as well for each thing, right? So it's not everybody needs to do things at the same time. Everybody doesn't, like, there's one uniqueness about us as spirits and human beings that it takes work for us as adults to accept, because we're being raised in a world where we're trying to fit, the style, the looks, and trying to fit all these parameters that society put against us, that then we ended up doing that with our children, that we want them to follow and do this, and we're being pressured, like the peer pressure around us, the mothers around us, to talk about things, and then you can't. So I think there's some work that we also need to do of like understanding and going deep, and like you said, I love what you said, like preparing those child for 2057 and not 2022, right? Because in 2057, for God's sake, we'll take a look at the inside of people more than the outside, or what they achieved, or how much money they have, and all that stuff. I mean, a long conversation, but I think there's some work for us to do as well on
I agree.
respecting that and accepting and being happy and loving with, yes, my child will get there in a couple of years later than other child, and that's okay.
Yes, JC, you said it all, and I agree, because parenting is a school, it's work. And when I see people planning to be parents, I say, great, but be prepared, because it's work. And that's where I see many of us like, oh, my child has a problem. I said, even the advanced ones will give you a headache, because you have to fight for them to find their room. But that's why we're parents, to evolve. It's a work of the heart. It's a work of relationships, and relationships are key for us. So preparing our children to find their space in the world by acknowledging the fact that they are children of God. Everybody is. And telling them daily, you were born to help. You were born to serve. You're not born to be served. You were born to serve. You're born to help. Empowering them to the true task they've come to do, as long as we are aware of it too. And the law of work is number one. It's to be useful. So being a parent is not simple. It's wonderful, but it's intense. And for those who have children, anybody nowadays, especially with the pandemic, you don't need any problem. The virus already brought us the reality when we thought somebody else was taking care of our children. Here they are. We thought a new year, and then again, the schools are closed. We have to start at home and then go back to school another day and then come back home. And then in this ping pong, we're like, oh my gosh, I need to parent them. I forgot, I was just sending them off again. And I have to be recalled. No, you're the parent. The teachers are the educators, but you're the first educator. So the good news is the Spiritist magazine, since the last issue in September 2021, every issue now has a column by Dr. Américo Cognotto in Brazil, who is a renowned spiritist and a physician who wrote several books about 10,000 things, including education. We have a team who beautifully translated the book, one of his books, Pequenos Deslizes, Grandes Problemas. This book is already translated, and we are publishing excerpts of the book as we go in each magazine. So you already have 2 issues, 55, 56 of the Spiritist magazine, talking about parenting from the Spiritist point of view. That may be very helpful, as Jayshi was mentioning to us.
Thank you.
Yes, I have a question. I don't know, Anna, can I go, or there's somebody else
No,
on
you
the
can
list?
only choose, and I think that will be the last one. It's 10:30.
Okay.
People have questions, you can send it to me, and then I can send it to Vanessa later, and she answers.
Thank you, Vanessa, for the wonderful lecture. I'm a nanny for over 30 years, and I have 2 boys, adults. I wish I knew what I know now. I probably would be a better parent. But as a nanny, I feel a great responsibility. And I work for a family with 2 boys, 5 and an 8-year-old, and they're brilliant. The parents are both biochemistry professors at Stanford, and the 8-year-old shows, I mean, he's a genius. But my concern as an educator, because I feel my responsibility, is he knows so much. He's in any area you can possibly imagine. But I see that he knows that he's good. And I'm a little concerned. And, you know, being a child of 2 scientists, you know, in their area, very competitive, I feel that he is stimulated for this competition. So when I'm with him, I feel like sometimes I want to bring him down a little bit, especially when he tries to show his brother that he's better than his brother. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So I would like some suggestions on how to do that, or, you know, how to go about that.
Beautiful. I think, Mirches, that's probably why you are there with him, right? To give this balance and teach him humility in a way. And people say, but Vanessa, how do I teach humility to a child? Nowadays, especially during the pandemic, some authors, I work with children at the School of Emotion, and I have these materials, and I can show it to you, because you can find, if not the book, the videos on YouTube where they do the read alouds that are fantastic. There's this series here, A Little Spot of Emotion. This is from Diane Albert, and she has several collections, and I love, it's not only this one, she has several, and I'll show it. It's a little spot of love, of anxiety, of sadness, of peaceful, anger, confidence, happiness, and she has in humility. And there's another author named Mary Nin. It's the Ninja Book of Emotions. She has a huge series with read alouds. I'll type it in here for everybody, the names. But what I like is that she teaches about the humble ninja. It's a way to introduce to children through, you know, these read alouds, these books, a way for them to conquer humility, because without humility, competition is good, but collaboration is even more important. But we can only collaborate when we humble ourselves. When we single ourselves out, we can't do much. So maybe you are the educator that they need, as you may have figured already, to bring this balance and teach about. And for families, I would recommend this book, The Family Virtues Guide. It's by Linda Popov. And I like about it, she talks about kindness, humility, perseverance. For educators at my child's school, they've started this year a program named Positivity Project, in which they teach these virtues, these positive emotions, including humility. And I think it's so important, especially in the United States, because our school system feeds too much of our vanity, the vanity of our children, and fosters too much competition. So I'd say we need to take action to counterbalance it. And I think you as an educator for these children can certainly encourage them to the beauty of humility while appreciating their uniqueness.
Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thank you, Vanessa. That was a great tip. Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you.
So I would like to wrap up this morning with deep gratitude to Vanessa for finding time to talk to us and share with us her knowledge. As you guys can get a glimpse of what I said about feeling blessed of knowing her. Vanessa, I would like to ask you in front of everyone to please come back, and then we continue this conversation. There's so much we can talk about that. And I think that the responsibilities that we have as parents is huge right now, mostly on this time of transformation. So the seeds that we are sowing on the kids' hearts are basically blooming on infinite stages. And it's our responsibility to help them find the right path for their own goodness, but for the better place that we want to live. So thank you.
Thank you.
We can make like next time. I'm gonna talk to you offline about that, and there are a couple more questions that I will send to you via WhatsApp. So to wrap up, I would like to thank all the benefactors that are always with us. We know that in a session like this, the good spirits, they come to our houses hours before. They take care of our families, they see our needs, they clean our houses, they fortify our spirits, they prepare the whole ambience so we can be ready for the knowledge. We'd like to thank also Vanessa for being with us. May all the work that she does be blessed. May she be able to distribute and share her knowledge with as many people as possible. We know that with technology, the boundaries are infinite. We would like to ask for our center, for our kids. Maybe all of us be protected and inspired and guided to better commitments. May our choices represent the choices of infinite, eternal spirits and not human beings living the material realm for a few decades. bless our time here, and we thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you so much, Vanessa.
Thank you, Anna.
Thank you,
you.
Vanessa.